Why does it feel like we're taking one step forwards and two steps back? Why is it that every time I show up here, I feel like I've got to brace myself or make a damn cocktail to get through last month's sustainability news and write these episodes? It's because the environmental movement is failing and I'm basically giving you a front row seat. That's what we're talking about today on Environmental with Dandelion. If this is your first time tuning in, hi, hello, I'm Ob, your host and the chief cultivator here at Dandelion Branding, where I'm on a mission to make sustainability part of mainstream conversations. The Dandelion team and I help brands fueling the transition tell their stories with really great content that isn't the useless AI slob filling your feeds right now. Okay? And here on Environmental with Dandelion, I am keeping you up to date on the sustainability stories that you do not want to miss while using my degrees in both criminal justice and community governance and advocacy to give you a real picture of what's going on in this sector worldwide. This is the first episode of 2026, so merry happy to you. And also, if you're still feeling in the jolly holidays, this might be one to miss because today I'm going to talk about what happened in December of 2025. And there's never been a clearer picture about why we're still failing. Yes, the environmental movement is failing. And don't worry, it's not your fault. It was built that way. But maybe we should worry because we're the only people that can fix it and we're very busy arguing. Now, before we do the why we're failing big girl news, a microcosm of the issue. You'll be shocked to learn this, I'm sure, but despite my above average click rate and watch time, the YouTube boob tube doesn't let this content grow. So let's people power this growth, baby. So please subscribe and let your eco-curious flag fly with a big ol' like and leave a comment that definitely does not say climate change is real, because we're going there in this episode, folks. The deniers, they're still out there, and they've taken over the EPA. Okay, now, I know we did an episode around the EPA last year, but here's the deal. Lee Zeldin, or Sleazy Leezy, as we call him, is back. And his favorite nasty man is standing behind him this time because the EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, has removed all mention of human-caused climate change from their website. I'm not gonna lie. I read this news on Ground News. This is a non-spawn, but I highly recommend Ground News. So I read it on Ground News, and then when I was writing this episode, I read a really lovely article from grist.org, and then I actually looked at the website to prove it to myself, and I ended up just really in my feels about this one, guys. Not only has the EPA actually removed almost 100 pages of climate change information from their website, their basic causes of climate change page are now listing changes in the Earth's orbit and rotation, variations in solar activity with two graphs that literally don't have any correlation with each other. Changes in the Earth's reflectivity, volcanic activity, and changes in naturally occurring carbon dioxide concentrations with two more graphs that show a correlation before and then a ton of extra carbon dioxide over the past 100 years. Where did all that extra carbon dioxide come from, Lizzie? Now, they must think or know that most people just read the heading 2, though, because if you actually read what this page says, literally none of them say that they are causing climate change right now. None of them. They say like they used to, or quote, have in the distant past. And I think my current favorite quote is, "The sun follows a very natural 11-year cycle of small ups and downs in intensity." Bottom chart. But the effect on the Earth is small overall. Over the same period, the average global temperature has increased markedly. Top chart. That is literally saying it is not a cause of climate change on the cause of climate change page. Also, guys, we have graduated. So in the summer, the climate aware, or as we like to call them here, you beautiful eco-curious creations. Okay, so we were called the climate change religion.
Climate change religion.
By Mr. Levy. But in December, EPA Press Secretary Bridget Hirsch reportedly wrote an email to the Post, and we have graduated to the climate cult. Remember, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Anyway, this is just an example, and it's the first one we're going to cover today of the environmental movement failing. And of course, this is in the United States in a current regime that refused to even attend COP30 and is openly encouraging division, threatening violence, and openly covering up absolutely heinous acts of child SA and trafficking. Please release all the files. Thank you. And that was a good place to start because it is the most egregious, but it isn't where we're ending with this conversation around December. No. It is happening all around the world. And the EU is the next up on our hit list today. Now, in case you don't know this about me, I'm both American and Dutch. I immigrated to the Netherlands in 2018, officially making me part of the problem. Although I'm a white lady, so I don't actually count when we talk about immigration being a problem in Europe. So if that seems irrelevant, keep listening, because the EU is nothing if not subtle in their aggressions towards progress. The new omnibus legislation that was released in December of 2025 simplifies environmental laws in the Union around industrial emissions, circular economy, environmental assessments, and geospatial data. I don't really think all those things go together, but the omnibus legislation does. Essentially, they're following the EPA's 2025 lead with the goal of cutting red tape and keeping the EU's competitiveness and fostering green growth. But this is greenwashing at its finest, friends, because the only real simplification here is actually a relaxation of rules and regulations that have already existed. So they are streamlining environmental assessments for granting permits necessary for the EU economy, which we learned already last year from the US. Remember that basically right now means energy and AI development. There's also more flexibility in the industrial and livestock rearing emissions directive. God, these names are ugly. This is the main EU instrument that reduces air pollutants, wastewater discharge, and like waste generation emissions into air, water, and land. And it prevents like waste generation from very large industrial installments and intensive livestock farms. And like some of these big farms are just exempt from reporting now. So like read big ad lobbyists, they're my favorite. They got their fingers and stuff again. But here's what's really unclear for me in this one. It's got to do with smallholder farms reporting. Like I couldn't find anything whether it makes a difference. So if you're a smallholder farm owner, could you let me know if this is helpful? Because I'm basically just reading that it reduces mandatory reporting from some of the largest polluters, but not all the farms. The omnibus legislation also repeals the substances of concern in products database because it costs money to maintain it. So this is apparently got a replacement with the digital product passport, but I see those on my plants and baby, they don't report hazards. They're like pictures. So we just we don't report hazards anymore. It's also making some changes to geospatial data availability, which I can't say I understand well enough, but I do know that geospatial data is really helpful for observing changes, or like our friends over at the Forest Conservation Fund use it as a data point to see things like illegal logging in their tropical forests. Guys, this is a fail. I am all for amending laws, making them simpler for people to understand and use, but this is actually just repealing of sustainability measures wrapped in a simplification bow. And if you saw my interview with Jim Beach, you know that I am not pro business deregulation. Because while that kind of work adds administrative tasks for businesses with sustainability at the core of what they do, it isn't a huge lift. And these assessments and reporting regulations are designed to spark change, right? Change tends to spark outrage, but I would rather live in a world where where everyone is outraged than watch as the planet continues to heat up. And yes, I do mean heat up from human activities. Okay, but surely there are some really good guys, right? And yeah, so I'm not going to sit here and say that every government is involved in a propaganda fueled cover up or situation. Just the ones with the most to lose. Let's talk about the UN Environment Assembly 7, shall we? Oh my gosh, this feels insane. Because they met on the heels of COP30 in December to talk about advancing solutions for a resilient planet. If you're like me, you're wondering why do we need both things? Because they're the same countries, the same places show up. They're having the same conversations, right? Okay. So I looked it up. I answered the question for both of us. They're different departments. And this is where we start to see the built-in failure for the environmental movement. Because the cops had almost 10 times the people in attendance. They're the big signaling places where figureheads and leaders show up to fluff the people about climate solutions. This is where the people in attendance, they're stakeholder groups. So you're going to see the lobbyists and the indigenous folks that show up. It's really contentious and it's really focused about political money and power shifting. Also, to note, it is the only place where actual laws can be put into place. Then the UN environmental assemblies, where environmental ministers from those same countries, they come and they sit down, they actually do the work and hammer stuff out. The people here are a lot more like scientists, chemists, waste experts, technical leads, the people who do the research and get the stuff done. Yeah, but they're not given enough political power to move the needle. There are super important resolutions and encouragements in this one on AI, circular economy, wildfire resilience, biodiversity, health, and even they talk about mining. And the outcomes are arguably more sound, they're more obtainable, and they're more focused than anything the cops show up, but they're not legally binding. It's almost like the leaders from the COP, they have all their chats. And then they go hey, environmental ministers, can you just boil stuff down and let us know what's important? But we're not going to make laws about that because we already did that together with the lobbyists earlier in the month. See where I'm going with this? It just feels really backwards. Like it's designed to fail by keeping real, possible, sustainability movement conceptual and unregulated. In the age of science and technology, we sure are doing a lot to ignore it and pretend that we're not. More on that later. Yeah. And these are just 3 examples from December of 2025. The EPA removing climate change from their website, the EU following suit with regulation relaxation, and just the ass backwards and environmental lawmaking setup we created. You can basically see how global powers are manufacturing this one step forward, 2 steps back approach to the environmental movement, which basically leaves us, and by us I mean me, asking, without the powerful people on board, who's here to make the difference? You are. We are. And here's an example of how. Because we can't be all doom and gloom here. I can't do that. Here's a good news. The U.S. national parks are back in the spotlights again, and it's the public outcry for protections that are actually working here. They're actually keeping the parks protected. So in December, the head of the Senate Committee for Energy and Natural Resources, Senator Mike Lee of Utah, calling you out, proposed an amendment to the upcoming Interior Appropriations Bill, because the US government shut down and they reopened, but they have to agree on a long-term budget still, right? Yeah. Would strip federal protections and maintenance from national parks, which would open up the national parks for sale. Now, Courtney and I saw this coming, back in the summer with the Make America Beautiful Again mandate. I think that's what it was called, where they made a priority to reduce regulations, remember? And then the One Big Beautiful Bill, they tried to actively sell off public land. Now, that direct sale was stopped in the One Big Beautiful Bill, but it was also stopped again in December by the massive outpouring of support for the national parks. And here's the thing, guys, they're gonna keep trying. Look, right? They massively defunded the national parks. Then they reduced the regulations around them. And now they've tried twice to set it up so the national parks would be for sale. And why? We know why. Look who's doing it. The Energy and Natural Resources Committee. So then I was like, okay, who are them folks? Okay, according to their website, this is what they cover. Energy resources and development, including regulation, conservation, strategic petroleum reserves, and appliance standard. Nuclear energy, Indian affairs, their words, not mine, public lands and their renewable resources, surface mining, federal coal, oil, and gas, other minerals leasing, territories, and insular possessions, and water resources. That's way so much. This is just a land grab that goes back to fossil fuels, energy dependence, and you know where I'm going with this one? Power and money. I'm getting really sick of talking about power and money within the sustainability world. But anyway, here, the people are stopping it with a bipartisan support of national parks. It's amazing. We don't have so many bipartisan support things happening right now in the world. And for you out of the USA, the You Make a Difference of it all doesn't stop with the world's most climbable wall. You should Google that. In a report from the Euronews, countries around the world, including the Netherlands, shout out, Brazil, Pakistan, and South Korea, have all strengthened their climate targets and created or amended new laws because people are demanding it. And oftentimes, this is because people are taking it to the government directly through litigation. Yep. People are literally suing governments and powerful companies like Shell and Total Energies. This has been going on for a decade. But as more people step up and demand their right to safe environments, more courts are taking notice. And even if a case fails, it can set a precedent for things like protective measures or mitigation funding. I really liked this quote from Sarah Mead, who's the co director of the Climate Litigation Network. Quote, what was a moral imperative 10 years ago has become a legal imperative. Big polluters, the governments and companies most responsible for climate change have a duty to pull their weight in the global effort to stop dangerous climate change. End quote. So even though the world leaders are off and above, kowtowing to outdated regimes in their decision making, we don't have to be. That is absolutely making a difference. Look, we are at a pivotal moment in the history of human relationships with our planet. Instead of simplifying by reducing regulations, we should be subsidizing regeneration and using technology to make those regulations into achievable goals, and then turning those achievable goals into mandated laws. Because let's face it, it doesn't matter what we say or what greenwashy spin we put on it, or whatever pretty words we put on the face of this issue. The environmental movement is still failing. The planet is still warming. The climate is still erratic. Whole species are going extinct. And people are suffering. Words and encouragements and midterm planning promises are placating for people in parts of the world that have the money to ignore the problem for now, including where I live and a lot of you listening. But there's only so much placating until we actually break things. Things are actually going to break. And that's no secret. But I find myself consistently asking why. Why spend the billions, nay, trillions on the crisis while lying about the cause or reducing mitigation efforts that we know save money and time? The UN Global Environmental Outlook, which was also released in December, December was a big month, okay? It was released in December, literally lays it out. We can save lives, make a higher GDP on average, and have a healthier planet if we make changes. Or we can continue on the path we're on, costing huge sums, wrecking economies, and literally killing millions and impacting the development of millions or billions more people. One would think this shouldn't be an uphill battle, but here we are. And I really just have to think they, like the royal they, whoever that is, they don't want increased GDPs across the board. I think they just don't care about the environment or progress. Like, it's an unfortunate reality that it's a casualty of late stage capitalism. They just want to maintain power and political access. Now, I've talked about this a lot in past episodes. It just keeps coming up. And I think it's going to keep coming up when we're talking about global issues and global change. And I'm not so naive to think that there aren't backroom discussions about keeping us stupid and controlling the narrative. I think the US is actually showing their hand with that one. I'm like, I don't think that there is a league of evil people out there trying to destroy the planet. I don't think that. But it's easier to maintain power and make money if eco-curious people are busy arguing over plastic straws and Christmas trees and ocean cleanup and air travel, while politicians reduce regulation on massive companies who are greenwashing their way to the top with recycled plastic that sheds more microplastics than virgin plastic garments. Guys. And if you need more evidence here, Truth Social merged with the nuclear fusion company in December. Yeah, media and energy. You know what? Because attention and power are like currency these days. But watch what happens in the rhetoric around renewable energy in the coming months. I'm pretty sure we're going to swing back towards renewable energy and the need to transition because suddenly owning renewables means money and power. I mean, it kind of already did, but like now the truth social, I don't know. The environmental movement is not failing because of our apathy or our weakness. It's failing because the design of political access, centralized finance, and media propaganda is literally engineered to protect the very current economic structure at all costs. Your fight isn't just against policy, but we're fighting against the actual design here. If I'm leaving you questioning what's next for the environmental movement, if you're feeling listless or hopeless, just remember what I said about how people are making the difference here in the faces of the powers that be. Can you imagine if we hadn't though, if we like hadn't been doing anything? Oh my God. I think that growing businesses and doing litigation in the social and environmental sectors is one of the major ways we are flipping this issue on its head before it's really going to be too late. So if you have a brand or your friend does or your auntie does, and you are dedicating your time and energy to the change, I would love to have a conversation with you about how to tell your story so that people in your eco-curious audience know more about how to take better action. But the best thing you can do for the environmental movement right now, where you don't have to move anything but your thumb or like maybe your arm if I'm talking from your pocket or something, is to hit the like button and subscribe to Environmental with Dandelion, because you are the ones that make the difference and we need these conversations to be louder. Thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye.